There are definitely a few important things to consider when deciding whether to start work in an elementary school in Washoe County School District or to start work in a pediatric private practice in Reno after grad school. One of the important things to consider is the main public policies that will dictate your service in each one of those settings. So for the elementary school in Washoe County School District, one main public policy that dictates service in the school setting is FERPA, and that stands for Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act. What this does is it ensures that parents or students have the right to inspect and review the student's educational records, request that a school corrects records which they believe to be inaccurate or misleading, and schools must have written permission from the parent of the student to release any information from a student's education record. One main public policy that dictates service in a pediatric private practice in Reno is the ADA, which is Americans with Disabilities Act. And there are three basic purposes of this act. Number one is to ensure that individuals with disabilities can participate fully in society. Number two is to ensure that individuals with disabilities can live as independently as possible. Number three, we need to make sure that they have access to self-sufficiency by removing any barriers that may be present. And then within that, there are 5 titles. Number one are about the rules that govern employment of people with disabilities. Number two is the coverage and rules that govern public services. Number 3 is regulations for public accommodations. Number 4 is telecommunications. And number 5 is due processes. And then another important thing to consider is what clients you're going to be serving in each setting and the primary purpose of the services that you're providing. So in an elementary school, the clients that you're serving are children who attend the school and have met all necessary requirements to receive therapy. So in an elementary school, you're probably looking at around the age of 4 to 13, depending on if it's a 5th grade elementary or a 6th grade elementary. So as long as they're at the school and they do qualify for your services. And then the primary purpose of those services are to support their growth academically and in social interactions related to school. So usually whatever the client is coming to you for is causing them to struggle or fall behind their same-aged peers with things like reading, writing, and social aspects as well, such as playing with children and talking to other children. In a pediatric private practice in Reno, the clients that you serve are going to be clients ranging from age 4 to 21, and the primary purpose of the services that you are providing are to support their growth and interaction within their community, so it deals with things outside of academics. And then licensure and certification is also very important to consider when going into different areas of speech pathology. So licensure is not optional. No matter where you work, state, setting, you do need to be licensed to practice as a speech language pathologist. And for the elementary school in Washoe County School District, at the state level, you need your Nevada State Teacher's License. And it's 1.5 units of continuing education every year. And then for ASHA, you also need to go through them. So you have to pay them for your membership. And then after a 3-year maintenance period, you must submit continuing education hours, which is 30 hours. And then one of those hours must come from ethics units. So you just have to continue your education and show that with ASHA. And the hours must all be ASHA approved hours. And your state level license hours can count towards ASHA. The licensure for private practice in Reno, first you will need your provisional license and then you will get a full regular license. At the state level, you need 15 hours every year of continuing education. For the ASHA level, you need money for membership, and then after the 3-year maintenance period, you must submit continuing education hours to them as well, and it's the same. 1 hour must come from ethic units, and they all must be ASHA approved hours. Certification, on the other hand, is more voluntary. It can get you a salary increase depending on where you're working. And one more thing, licensure is at a state level and certification is at a more national level. So most insurances require that if you are billing for services, you do need to be ASHA certified. So that means you need your CCC through ASHA. So it's kind of the same for both the elementary school and the private practice with that certification. And then moving on to question 2. So it's, you are a clinician who has been evaluated and assessed a client and determined that there are sufficient areas of weaknesses that indicate the need for therapy. It is time to start programming a plan of treatment. The first talks about selection of targets. So before you start your therapy session with any client, you need to have goals and objectives. The first step in planning your intervention and targets is identifying the communicative behaviors to be acquired in the program. These are called long-term goals and are drawn from the assessment data. These are relatively broad target behaviors that are to be achieved during a course of therapy. After determining these long-term goals, you must decide how are you going to help the client achieve these goals. The next step is to identify short-term objectives. These objectives must have a do statement that identifies the action the client is to perform, the condition, which identifies the situation in which the targeted behavior is to be performed. That's like when, where, and whose presence, things like that. And the criterion, which specifies how well the target must be performed for the objective to be achieved. Then you move on to the sequencing of targets. So after the objectives are determined, it's necessary to determine how to move the client toward achieving these objectives. This usually involves a task analysis. This is used to create task sequences. These are small steps that can be followed through which clients progress towards their goals. To accomplish this breakdown, a clinician examines the input and output prerequisites necessary for completing the tasks. As long as the client does have the requisite skill, a task sequence can be devised. And then the task sequence is the steps the clients will be guided through to achieve the goal. The targets should be realistic while still challenging the client. Then deciding on behavior modification techniques that you will use, and these are different types of consequences. So the type of behavior modification techniques that will be most effective will differ from client to client. Positive reinforcement is a rewarding event or condition that is presented to the client immediately contingent on the desired behavior. So it can be candy, a sticker, or verbal praise. Something like that. If you decide to use positive reinforcement, you have to make sure that the reinforcement does not lose its effect on the client and be wary that positive reinforcements are not the most natural form of reinforcements. Negative reinforcement is an unpleasant event or condition that is removed or avoided contingent on the performance of desired behavior. This isn't always effective for therapy as we cannot make the client feel threatened, and negative reinforcement may have this effect on some clients. Finally, punishment is a response or an event that is applied and designed to decrease an undesired behavior. This can be necessary if the client is uncontrollable or does something that is inappropriate. Punishment must never get out of hand and should serve to help de-escalate a bad situation. To determine which type of behavior modification techniques are most effective, you may need to do some trial and error and get to know your client. And finally, building in techniques to help the desired behaviors generalize outside therapy. It is very important that the desired behaviors will continue out of therapy and into the client's everyday life and activities. Intervention activities vary in their degree of naturalness. Intervention activities, vary in their degree of naturalness and fall along a continuum of naturalness. This represents the degree to which intervention context corresponds to everyday communication situations and interactions. You can be creative when helping the client build techniques to help them generalize this behavior. You can talk to your client and find out what is most important for them to be able to do outside of therapy, and then come up with activities that will help them achieve this. For example, if the client says they really would like to be able to go up to the counter and order their own Starbucks without stuttering, you could start practicing that interaction with them while giving them the techniques to help them feel confident with their speech. Then you can progress and eventually have them try the activity outside in their community. And that is all. Thank you for a great semester.